All right, CvCISO Podcast listeners, welcome to episode 14 of the CvCISO Podcast. I'm Evan Francen. Joining me is Meg. Not Raj, or Jordan is not with us today because we had to move the recording time back. But I'm really excited. I'm really excited for this episode because we're inviting a new guest. We're inviting Greg Schaffer. And if you don't know Greg, he runs a pretty swell podcast, the Virtual CISO Moment. And he's been a vCISO for quite a long time. I thought he's somebody that I respect a lot, and I wanted to invite him to the show. So welcome, Greg.
Thanks for having me. And it's my fault, I'll just say, that we had to move the time because I was recording an episode of the Virtual CISO Moment prior to this, and I haven't yet figured out how to clone myself, so I couldn't do two at once. And even then, it's like I need another camera and all that stuff as well. But happy to be here. I'm very excited. So let's start talking about vCISOing and all the other stuff about security and all that.
Heck yeah! Well,
Welcome,
and you're a guy who's in high demand, man. So it's a good thing. And I know you well enough. I'm getting to know you even more, but I know you well enough to know that that's not an ego thing when I say that. You are in high demand because I think you're a person. You know, I always preach the three things: trust, credibility, and likability. And I think you're strong in all three of those areas, which I think makes you in high demand.
I appreciate that. And I'll send you the Venmo for $50 for saying that. So thank
you. Meg, are you paying for this one?
Yeah, I got it. I got your back.
Yeah. So how you doing, Meg?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here and learn from Greg and hear more about the details of what it is that you do. I mean, we kind of have an idea, but this is by happenstance, right?
Yeah.
There was a post out there on LinkedIn that we got engaged with, and then Evan got engaged with, and Greg ended up taking the class, and I'd seen your name out there a lot, but didn't know who you were, and now here we are on the podcast. So super excited.
Yeah, and I know we'll talk more about the CvCISO course as we go through the podcast today. But I mean, you challenged me. Basically that sort of a challenge is like, well, you obviously believe in the product so much that I'm like, I will take that challenge, and I'm glad I did, and we'll talk more about that. But I do want to say up front that I'm very happy because less than 48 hours ago I passed the CvCISO exam.
Yay!
So, and I actually, you know, I'm at the stage in my career where I'm like, I don't really need certifications anymore. I'm thinking about the next certification is like full-time Social Security. It's like, you know, but I thought, well, okay, I'll go through this again, and had to deal with the encryption stuff. But other than that, it was good.
Yeah.
But
well, I thought it was so cool too because you struck me as a person almost immediately of a very high integrity.
Yes.
You know, and I'm always attracted to people that I think emulate the qualities that, you know, I hope to attain. You know, it's because, you know, a lot of times, especially on social media, you know, you say something or I say something, and I think people are quick to judge, and then it gets into this adversarial thing, and I get where you were coming from too on that post, because it was, I mean, how often do we see in this industry where people are, you know, in it for the quick buck? They just want to make something, make a whole bunch of money. Over the years, I know I've gotten jaded a lot, you know, from that. I'm tired of it. I'm tired of people taking advantage of other people. And so I really liked how that's where you were coming from. And then when we, you know, started to interact, it was like, wait, we're both here for the same mission.
Yeah, we're on the same team, and
Yeah.
I mean, I love that it was like I remember like the first response, and you certainly expressed your mind, and I appreciate that. And I was like, no, wait. I've already talked with this Meg person, never met Meg, but you know,
Right.
we already had our little exchange. I'm like, I think I've got this wrong. At the very least, it's like I'm like. And I didn't actually name the course back then. I just said that, well, I think that there's a virtual CISO course out there that I don't know. I had looked into it and I didn't get too much of a response on it 2 years ago when I initially looked into it. And I'm like, and I'm jaded too, because there's so many so many charlatans out there that can say it's like, take the course, 6 weeks later you'll be making six figures, and it's like, stop.
Yeah.
That's not true. It's like, and unfortunately in the industry you have so many people that they bought into that, and it might have worked a little bit when you could like just raise your hand on LinkedIn and you got a job, you got three offers. But in today's environment it is so bad, and now you've got a lot of people that unfortunately they were sold a false bill of goods, and they're struggling. They're struggling to find work, and they're struggling to find their place. And I think some of them are realizing that perhaps maybe they are struggling because they got into it for the wrong reasons. And
Yeah.
I'm always of the opinion that if you're really passionate about whatever it is that you do, you'll make it work. My mantra is, so when you approach working, if you have a heart of a servant, you'll always be successful, because you're measuring success by your service, by what you're producing, and then everything else will come. And Evan, I understand that yours is. Let me make sure I got it right, because I heard it so many times during the class. It's like uh, mission before money. Did I get that right? Okay.
Yep.
Because if I had said it backwards, that would have been bad. All right, podcast over. We're done. So yeah, mission
No,
before
we just
money.
have
If
to
you
edit
focus
that
on the
part.
mission, the money will come, and don't focus on the money. And that's so true, because it's like, it's just amazing, because people will know you. They'll know you because of your integrity, your work ethic, your focus on actually helping folks. For me, as a virtual CISO, I'm pretty clear about this. It's like, I don't want to take on any clients that just want to deal with becoming compliant with something. There's many folks out there that'll help you with that. But for me, in my advanced age, I want to spend the rest of my career actually helping folks build information security programs. And I have no idea where I was going with this. So it's that senior
No,
moment. But
I love that, man. And that's it's I'm also, up there in age, and, we've both been in this industry for a long time. We've seen a lot of things, and,
mm,
it's personal to me. I'm tired. I hate seeing people get taken advantage of. I hate
yeah,
it. And hate is a very, very strong word, especially for somebody like me, but we see it all the time. And sometimes we take advantage of people without even realizing that we're taking advantage of people. And in those instances, I have to remind myself that to not let my ego get in the way, that maybe I am doing it wrong. Maybe there's a better way, but I'm going to stay true to what I'm focused on, which is at the end of the day, helping people. Because every time there's a breach, every time something bad happens, anytime, the CrowdStrike thing, this morning, people suffer.
yeah,
Hmm.
And it's such a large interconnected world that, maybe I don't feel it personally, but somebody does.
hmm,
Today, somebody or a team of somebody's lost their job, probably at CrowdStrike.
hmm,
You've got God knows how many people were inconvenienced, missing flights, not being able to take money out of the bank, having
hmm,
trouble at the hospital. I mean, God knows what, the full impact of this was. And at the end of the day, when you bring it all back, it comes down to somebody at some point made a poor decision. There's always consequences for poor decisions. It may not be obvious and it may not be upfront, but eventually it's going to come back to haunt you. And so when I looked at CISOs and vCISOs and the way they operate, part of me, I mean, the ones that won't admit when they're clearly doing things poorly, they almost become enemies.
yeah,
And then you've got the ones who just don't know. And so you want to be this mentor, and you want to try to help them to do it right. Again, realizing going into all of this that I'll stick to my guns on why I'm here, but I can't stick to the guns on all the hows that on how I do it. So, but you have that same approach, and it was obvious from day one with you. Just a person of integrity, man, you can't undersell that. I mean, there are very few people in this world that I would trust with my own security program. I can probably count them on one hand. And I think you're one of those people that I would trust with my security program, because you approach it correctly. You're willing to admit when you make mistakes. You understand accountability. And so anyway, I could preach all day. I love that, but I want to learn. And I think for our listeners tell me more about you. Like, when did you get started in this industry? Tell us about your story.
Oh gosh. So my story goes back to when I was in college. I was a undergraduate student for engineering, mechanical engineering at the time. I had started as aerospace, but then this event happened in the world, the end of the Cold War. The Berlin Wall came down, and suddenly there was a lot less need for aerospace engineers, which meant that there was more of a glut in the market. And I saw this coming, and I'm like, well, I'm already halfway through the mechanical engineering or the aerospace engineering program. And aerospace and mechanical, they're almost pretty much the same program until you get to the like junior and senior level. And even then, they kind of split not too much. So I decided to downshift or shift maybe over to mechanical engineering. I loved it. Figured I was going to be designing stuff and all that. Now during this time, because I was a poor college student, I worked part time. Well, I've always had a job. It seems like ever since being a paper boy at like 12 or 13. And I worked at several Burger Kings. I was pretty good at calling out whalers. A whale is not a fish, by the way. That's why they had to change the name. So I bet you most people out there don't know that the name of the fish sandwich that they have, Big Fish, I think they call it. It used to be called a whaler. Well, anyway, we can save that for the fast food podcast
Another
later.
episode. Yeah.
But so in the process of this, where I'm going with this is that there was a job advertised at the university for a part-time network technician for the University of Buffalo. And I'm like, well, this is great because if I got that job, it pays about maybe a little bit more, but it's also on campus, which makes it a lot easier to go to. So I applied and I got it because the person who was interviewing, he had been a drill instructor in the Marines, and he knew that I
Oh
was in the
boy.
Air Force Reserves at the time. And he's like, well, if you can take a technical order, which is basically procedures, and be able to fix airplanes, well, then you should be able to do this networking stuff. And he was right. And then that started this love of all things technology. And this is this is 1989. So networking back then, as you remember, it was more serial connections, and the only Ethernet that we had on the campus was ThinNet, 10 base 2, the little coax cable. And so I kind of grew up like with the whole TCP/IP network stuff evolving. And then as time went on, I realized that I really enjoyed this, and that became my career. I ended up becoming a network engineer at the University of Tennessee Medical Center in Knoxville. That was a career jump to there's a personal reasons too why I wanted to get out of Buffalo, but I won't go into that here. Um, and then from there, I felt that I was at a point that I needed to, after a couple of years, I was ready to lead a team and have my own network, so to speak. And so I, quote unquote, owned the network at Middle Tennessee State University for 12 years. And that's where I became more into security for a couple of reasons. First of all, what's the first thing you think about with security, particularly at that point in time? You think firewall. Well, and what's firewall? Firewall is a network device. And so, what group would be in charge of the firewall? Not database, it would be networking. And so,
Yep.
our first firewall I brought in. And it was probably around the 05 ish time when I realized, 04, 05, when I realized that I was actually spending more time stopping people from communicating as opposed to trying to facilitate it, because of like blocking certain things. And back then it wasn't so much for security as much as well, I guess it was, but from the availability part of security,
Mm-hmm.
you had all this music file sharing stuff starting with Napster, that saturated the bandwidth, and had to figure out how to do something about that. So got into security that way. I was the default security officer, learned about something called ISO 17799. I think I have it right. 17799, not
Yep.
999,
And even before
17799.
that, BS. So they might even called it BS 17799, right?
I think so at the time. I don't think it was ISO
Yeah.
at that point. You're right. You're right. So I started to learn about standards, and also I went for the CISSP during this time. I also this is when I was also going for my master's in information systems project management. And I was surprised that with the CISSP, my strongest domain was not networking. It was risk management. And I'm like, oh, okay. What is this risk management stuff that I hear about? I mean, I learned about it in project management for the risk management when I was going for the master's there. We talk about project risks and all that. So, got the CISSP. Really, I realized I think I want to go down more this path of this CISO thing that they're talking about, and had an opportunity to apply to be the first chief information security officer for the combined governments, the metropolitan government of Nashville and Davidson County. Yay, that's great. Well, why were they looking for a CISO? Because they had a breach shortly after the mayor was elected, and without going into that details of that story, that ended up leading to them realizing that they need to do two things. They need to have a security program that's actually based on a standard. They settled on 27,001, and why I'm still not sure, but they did. It's just okay. And second, they needed somebody to lead it, and I was the lucky person that took that. And then uh, I have to be honest, it wasn't the most satisfying job. Um, Government and politics is a difficult place to work, and I wanted to go somewhere where there was more operational push as opposed to, yeah, be careful about how I say it, but it's just like, it just seemed like that there was more security theater going on maybe
Yeah.
in the government. So I became CISO for a bank. And then finally, as I'm doing this CISO stuff for this, it was like a $4 billion bank. So, small bank, a community bank, but not small.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I heard about more about this vCISO stuff. And so I sent out, I did some internet search, and I don't know if I ever told anybody how I actually got into this field. It's like I sent out a couple of queries to folks that were looking for a virtual CISO. One never responded, and then the other one was like, "Ooh, yeah, I just got a client, a big one actually. I need some help. And by the way, it's going to pay this amount per month." And I'm like, "Well, that's a pretty good amount for
Yeah.
a part time gig." And that's how I started. That and actually, that was the same person that I was talking that told me about CrowdStrike today. And then eventually, at some point in time, and this is the final part of it, because I know I don't want to suck all the air out of the podcast,
No,
but
that's the reason why you're the guest, man.
the as I'm doing this part time, and I ended up doing working on 3 clients part time with this MSSP. I got, and I have this testimony out on my YouTube channel. The channel is very easy to
Yeah,
remember.
tell people about it.
It's vCISO. So if you go to youtube.com/ampersand vCISO, you'll find it. But on there, there's a whole bunch of videos, including the Virtual CISO Moment podcast. But there's my testimony, and what I mean by that is I told my story to this Christian Business Leaders Roundtable a couple of months after I went solo. And the reason why I went solo is because I got this God tap on my shoulder saying, "Greg, you're doing very well with your talents, but I think you can do better." And I'm like, well, I've always had a job. I have never been unemployed. I have always had a job. That's it right there. Yeah. And I I was, I was kind of afraid. I'm like, I like to eat. I think is what I said in the testimony. But every time I left a job, it was always for another job. Never got laid off or anything like that. And, I mean, that's a blessing. But I said yes because when God asks you to do something, the proper response, the best response, is always yes. And so
Yeah.
I
God
formed
blesses
vCISO,
obedience.
and I formed vCISO services, and then here I am. I mean, 7 years later, still doing it. I never wanted to really grow too big. I never anticipated having anybody work with me on this. It was going to be just the Greg show. And in 19, I guess I was about the time when I brought on somebody part time because, I'll be honest, and you can appreciate this. I wanted someone to do the vendor risk assessment, the questionnaires for this one client, because I hate those things. I just hate
Yeah.
them. And but since then, brought on more people. I've got 5 others that work with me right now, and I'm in a good spot. This is where I want to be. I don't want to.
That's awesome.
I think at one point in time, you had said something. I can't remember where I ran across this. Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. It was on the last episode of this podcast I was listening to. You were talking about how some people, they want to have like 100 employees, and some people are fine just doing it by themselves. And I'm kind of in the lower end. That's not my drive. So that's kind of like my story in like 10 minutes.
I love
So
it, man.
Nice.
Because I think, when people share their stories and they share their testimonies, we do so because, I think you and I and most people do so because we're hoping that other people will see themselves in it.
Hmm.
mhm.
I think there's lots of different ways to get into this industry. There's lots of different ways to become a vCISO. And there's no like one way to do it. And I just realized, because I'm looking at the camera right now, like I have some serious bags under my eyes. I don't think I'm getting enough sleep.
You're worried about CrowdStrike.
You're not getting enough sleep. I can tell you that.
Whatever, Meg, you're my work mom.
Evan's messages come through at like 3:40 in the morning.
There's lots of work to do. But that's the motivating thing, I think, is this purpose, this mission. And I don't think enough people take enough time to really reflect on their own why.
Hmm.
Why are you here?
Yeah.
Why do you want to? Because I get all the time, my background is very similar to yours,
Hmm.
which is great because I think we're roughly the same age. We got into security kind of the
I
same
think I'm a couple of
time.
years older than you. I'm
Yeah,
57. I won't say how old you are, but I'm
I'm
57.
53,
So I'm 4 years older.
but mentally I'm
I've
like,
got you both feet.
You're a kid. I'm sorry.
yeah, well, mentally I'm like 16.
Yeah. Well, you're older than me mentally. Okay, because I'm
Yeah,
12.
yeah. Well, there you go. But I think the that's also very intriguing because as I'm getting to know you more, there's so many similarities in that because I also came up through networking. My parents, and even the Marine Corps. I grew up with 2 Marine Corps parents. My father retired from the Marine Corps in '79. My mother was 6 years active, and I'm an only child.
Mm, I didn't know
So
that.
so it was like I had a drill instructor every day.
Sometimes I wish
Growing
I
up.
was an only child, but oh, my brothers don't listen to security stuff, so I think I'm safe there.
edit, edit that part out. But
Here, let me clip that.
but I also
Hey,
came up through networking and kind of back in that time, there wasn't security jobs.
no. I mean, it's kind of funny because you have like red team, blue teaming, purple teaming, all this other stuff and all these other sub disciplines and everything. And back then we called it, at least I did, I called it troubleshooting. I mean, you just wanted your network to work right, and if somebody's doing something that you don't want on the network, you don't like that because then you get paged at 2:30 or 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Yeah, pager. We had pagers back then.
Your
And
beeper.
and Beeper, yeah, I still have mine from the university. Sorry, Buffalo. I guess New York State's going to come after me now. But it was all about you'd want to be proactive. You'd want to scan stuff to make sure there weren't vulnerabilities because you wanted the network to stay up, not necessarily because you were worried about security stuff. I mean, there was that component, but the mindset was totally different. And now I can never remember which is red or blue teaming. Somebody told me I think blue is defense and red is offense. Did I get it right?
Yeah, that is right. And then, but to confuse things, there's purple teams, and now I've even seen people start referring to rainbow teams. I don't know what the hell that is.
Well, there's gold teams too, I understand, and I can't remember what that is. But I made some sort of comment that I thought that was a squadron in the old Battlestar Galactica or
Yeah,
something.
that purpose, getting the purpose, the why. Because over the years, you know, you look back on your career, and I'm grateful for everything. I've always believed that everything that happens, there's a purpose behind it. There's a reason why something happens. Something goes sideways, and so being a person, who follows God, follows Jesus, I'm always like, why? What's the purpose? What are you trying to teach me in this? And having that mentality is really, I think it's served me well, and it's also kept me humble. So we talk about the mission. The mission drives everything. I don't, working at 3 o'clock in the morning doesn't seem like work to me. I love it. It's a mission. There's a purpose. I can see that through the work that we do, through the work that you do, through the work that you do, Meg, we're yeah, that word, affecting people's lives, right?
Now, when you work at 3 o'clock in the morning, though, is
Yeah.
that the tail end of the day for you, or is that the beginning of the day, which it is for me? Because I am an early riser, not quite 3 usually, but definitely 4.
I'm a big ADHD guy. So I do not have a routine for anything. I
Okay.
don't. So some mornings I'm going to bed at 3. Some mornings I'm getting up at 3. This would be, my house would be the wrong house for you to rob.
Because there's no discernible pattern. So
Yeah.
None whatsoever. But what I'd like to talk about is purpose. I'd like to learn a little bit more about your transition into vCISO and kind of what you're doing now. And then I would also like to hear any advice that you have for people who are considering, either they've been a CISO for a long time or an information security person for a long time, and they've been thinking about it. They've been dabbling.
And
Yeah, go
I'd
ahead.
also like to hear about your book a little bit.
Oh, yes.
Do a little
yeah.
plugging for your book.
I appreciate that. We can plug that in a little bit later, and then they're actually intertwined. But um, so Evan, you talk about purpose, and well, first of all, when I was going even before starting the CvCISO course, but definitely within the first couple of classes, it was kind of funny because part of it was like every time you said something, I'm like, yes, 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 that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Um, I probably agree with you on like 98% of the things. We could
That's
talk offline about the
that's pretty
2%.
good.
Mhm.
It's more than
But
anybody else I know.
but well,
That's
I
pretty
mean, but
scary, actually.
well, from a pragmatic standpoint of actually having done this for a while, not nearly as long as you have, but the VC sewing, but the one thing that really came out, I kind of knew after the first week. I'm like, I'm going to really like this, and I think this is actually a very good thing for the industry, because you brought out the most important thing about that class was your reason for doing it, your purpose, and I commend you on that, because you also have identified this serious issue that we have out there. That's like there are people out there that are helping SMBs that aren't really helping. They're sometimes making things worse. And what's the best way to address that? Do you criticize and slam and say no, you're no good? No, you're not going to get anywhere with that. There's a gap there. Let's try to solve the problem. There's a lot of people that want to be virtual CISOs, and there's a lot of people who want to be who decide to start practicing without having the necessary background for it. Not everybody can be a CISO and then become a virtual CISO. There's just not enough. You said this during the class. There's not enough CISOs. There's not enough. There's not enough supply to fill that demand. Um, so you talk about purpose. The purpose of the class is right on, and it should align with most people taking it, because when you're talking about wanting to be a virtual CISO, you should be wanting to do it because you realize that you have a mission and a desire to help. And I think that that's ubiquitous across any career field. And here it's helping small and mid-sized businesses, which desperately need that. So, when you asked me about the why that I jumped into the VC, and what sort of my experience has been, that's been the first part. And um, one of my one of my guiding principles, if you will, is that, and I learned this early on practicing this. Well, first of all, just to step back a little bit, when you first start going out on your own, it's scary, and I had runway because I was working with an MSSP that did all the hard work. Getting clients is hard. It's harder now than it was back then because there's a lot of competition out there, and
Mhm.
and it's very
Mhm.
difficult. Back then, it was very hard, particularly if you haven't established a name for yourself and a reputation and all of that. And it took me 18 months before I landed my actual first virtual CISO engagement on my own. I had some smatterings of project work, risk assessments, gap assessments, those sorts of things. But I was like, at one point in time, I was getting a little bit discouraged. But again, getting back to the why and the yes, saying yes to God, you just keep on going with the faith. Um, but it is a very scary time when you first start, and you have the tendency to want to do everything. You want to say yes to anything that comes along. And I encourage people not to do that. I know it's tough. Before you jump into this, you should do a risk assessment of yourself, your finances, your abilities. Can you market? Can you go out there and try to mine for clients? I mean, it's 80% of what I still do in some way, shape, or form, including something like this, is part of getting the name out and getting, the Virtual CISO Moment podcast started as the Virtual CISO Minute, me talking, just saying, hey, this is what a risk assessment is. This is what a SOC 2 is. This all, and maybe each episode, if I had 5 people view it, it was lucky. And that was like, including me viewing it 4 times. So, so the why is so important, and there's not going to be an immediate, like, unless you get extraordinarily lucky. I mean, that's why you can't go. Let's just say that as a baseline, let's just say that X virtual CISO firm charges their client $300 an hour. Not to say that hourly is the right way to go, but let's just stick with that for now, because
Yeah.
I know I agree with your position on that as well. But let's just say $300 an hour is what you base it on. Well, the virtual CISO is not going to get anywhere near that, because you've got so much that you need to do as far as running the business, um, uh, marketing the business. If you do it yourself, that's fine, but you have to realize that that's a job way beyond just doing the security stuff. That's why if you contract with another firm, you're not going to get the hourly rate that they charge, for obvious reasons. I mean,
Right.
there's overhead and all that. But what I found early on is so long as I stuck with that and did not go off on the side and start taking things that didn't apply. And this is one of the things that maybe I would have liked to have seen a little bit more talked about in the class.
I'm
I
taking
I
notes.
I fundamentally like explain to prospects about the 3 lines of defense, and that the virtual CISO sits in the second line, and that's what we do. But I was tempted to want to take first line, Microsoft 365 admin, this and that. Well, I could figure out how to do some of that stuff, and maybe make it work, and hopefully not, like, bring everything down. You know,
Yeah.
not crowd strike anybody. But if you stay with your core competency, I learned that from the president at First Bank, which was the job before I went solo. Is that stick with your core competency? Don't go crazy trying to offer so many services. You'll do fine eventually, but you gotta keep plugging at it. You gotta keep plugging at it, and so long as your why is so long as you really believe in your why,
Yeah.
you'll
Yeah.
get
And
there.
I think a good why, I mean, at least for me, and I think it's a common why for a lot of people like us, is we know that this is a service industry, not a product industry. We know
Hmm.
that security affects people, that it's more about people than it is about technology or information,
Hmm.
right? And so when I make decisions or when I try to do things, I try to have empathy for who's going to be affected by this. Like from a pure security perspective, yeah, it's obvious, do that thing. But then you think like, okay, well, other people are going to have to deal with this thing, this new control I put in place. And so, if as a security person, if I put controls in place or make recommendations that restrict the business or the organization's ability to fulfill their own mission or make more money, then I really need to question whether or not that's the right thing to do. right? And so it's this,
Well,
constantly, which is good because you get, it certainly helps on the trust side of things, because I like when people call bullshit on me
mhm.
because they find it's not bullshit. I mean,
Well,
it's just kind of fun.
well, and that's one of the reasons, kind of tangentially, why I'm of the position that some CISOs would make horrible VCISOs, and
Yes.
and it's because it's a different environment. To your point, you have to understand the business model, the business risk tolerance. It's different with SMBs. You can't go to an SMB and do the de facto like new CISO thing. Do a gap analysis. Oh, you're monitoring, your SIM's not good enough. Let's get in a new tool, put it in. 18 months later, you realize you're not getting the ROI on that, but you've already floated your resume to the next gig and you can move on. You can't do that as a virtual, and I'm not saying most CISOs do that. I'm
Right.
obviously exact hyperbole there. But the point is that with a small business, mid-sized business, you can't like suddenly start coming in and recommending tools or recommending more services or more this or more that. You have to know when to say no, and in order to do that, you have to understand the business intimately. I
Mhm.
mean, there are some CISOs that just couldn't get there. On the flip side, there are a lot of people that can get there without having been a CISO, if they have the risk management knowledge and expertise behind it. And that's one of we talked about, like, well, what are some advice that you would give to someone when wanting to enter into this field? More so than anything, you have to understand you're not going to rely upon a team of like 10, 50, or 100 people to back you up. You're you. They're going to count on you to understand their business, so that and you have to pull back on some of the things that you might want to do. It's okay, because ultimately our job as CISOs and virtual CISOs. Did I lose you?
Nope.
Oh, right
Okay.
here.
I just had all my monitors just went blank for a second, so sorry about that.
It's probably
Um,
CrowdStrike.
yeah, just about to say. I didn't know I had CrowdStrike on my machine. Oh well, okay. Well, inventory. My software asset inventory in my firm is horrible because I didn't know that. No, seriously, um, you have to get to a point where you understand that I keep on coming back to when to say no, and that's a risk management decision. And ultimately, as CISOs, virtual CISOs, we're called to explain as completely as possible the threat and risk environment, so that senior management, upper management, they can make risk informed decisions. The board of directors and all of that. I think they get the
Well, you bring up a good point too, because I remember the early days. You talked about starting. I'm not a salesperson. I don't
no, neither
like
am
sales.
I tried cold calling and over a couple of days, and I felt dirty. I can't
Oh
do it.
man, yeah. I mean, it's because I think another thing about information security is this is relational. It's not transactional,
That's
and
why
I
cold
feel
calling doesn't work. Yeah.
exactly. And so, because I get a lot of people who ask that. Well, give me some advice for starting a business, and the first thing is commit to it. Either
Yes.
do it or don't.
Yeah.
Don't half-ass it. And so you're going to need to do a whole bunch of, like you said, personal inventory of what I'm good at, what I'm not good at, what I want to do, what's my purpose. Do I have the means to accomplish something? I mean, do your own risk assessment, but then commit to it. Because and I use myself as an example, when I left my last real job, I mean, I worked in pharmaceutical, man. I mean, it's a $4 billion pharmaceutical. I was probably making $300,000 a year. I had so many stock options, and I could. I thought, well, I could. Worst case, I can go get another job. I can go
Hmm.
back and work. But when I did my own self inventory, I was like, but I have a purpose, and my
Hmm.
purpose is bigger than working for somebody, and it's bigger than my paycheck, and it's bigger than. And I had to get, and I'm happily married. My wife is my best friend. God, she's amazing. Um, so having her support, and then we committed. We committed to why we're doing it, what we're going to do, and I lost my house early on. And my house went into foreclosure because I didn't have sales. We had 5 kids in the house. We had 2 cars. My wife, and I still blame her for this, even though she's my best friend, she broke one of our cars. So we have 5 kids, all school age, toting around in one car. I'm trying to grow a business, losing the house. And what people should get out of that isn't, there's nothing special about me. It should be an inspiration that there will be tough times, but it's the mission, it's the purpose that gets you through those tough times.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to get to this point in my life where I would have questioned, what if I would have gone for it? I had this urge, I had this feeling, I had this calling that I could provide value here and I could do something good for myself, my family, my customers. I didn't do it. And the reason why I didn't do it was it got hard, or I just ignored the calling, or really my mission wasn't the
I'd
mission.
even say
You know?
I'd even say that with the mission is what helps you get through that time. If
Yeah.
you're not really, honed in on what the mission is, going through something like that, what you went through, Evan, you could almost lose faith in the mission.
Well, you can, and that's where faith comes in. That's
Mhm.
where faith is so important for me. And I understand that there are people of different faiths and different walks. I'm not judging that. I'm using my own example of how it got me through those times. And then when you have other difficult times, because that's the way life is, right? I mean, look at CrowdStrike. They're a billion, multi whatever $1 billion company. And George Kurtz, the founder, he's probably not having a very good day today. He's probably a really, really tough time for him. I can only imagine. But when you go through those tough times, I think it reinforces your mission, and it also gives you confidence that you can tackle bigger and tougher things. They're all growth opportunities.
Yeah.
So I think
Well,
people that are starting out as VCSOs, if this is your calling and you feel it, you're in the game for the right reason. If you're not in the game for the right reason, you do actually become an enemy of mine and Greg's and others like us. So we're going to either do everything we can to change your mind, change your purpose, or I don't mind saying it, or put you out of business.
yeah, I don't like. I've seen people say this before. They'll say something like about wanting to become a virtual CISO because they say, "quote I want a piece of the pie." I'm like, that doesn't really fly with me.
No,
It's immediately you're starting out of the gate. I want,
Mhm.
and you want to get something as opposed to wanting to serve, wanting to help, wanting that's what makes a, if anything makes a quality virtual CISO, it's that inane desire to want to help, service, nothing else, nothing else.
right.
Um, but you talked about something that I wanted to just expand upon a little bit. You talked about it was very difficult when you started because of what you were going through, but you had the support of your wife and presumably your children, even though they were school age, they may not have understood quite what was going on. I think that that's so important. From when I first started, I had a lot of conversations with my wife about this. When I first approached her with the idea of going independent, she said, "Heck no," except for that she didn't use the word heck, um, and because she was scared. And literally within the next day, she came to me. She said, "Greg, I thought about this a little bit more. You're really good at what you do, and you really have a passion for wanting to do this. I'm with you 100%." Now, it was a little bit easier for us because she's a career person as well, too. She has a very good career, very good income. So I did my personal risk assessment. Worst case scenario, if something went south, I mean, my goals were very modest. All I wanted to do was make $60,000 a year. I know that that sounds ludicrous, but really, I went through and said, what would make this successful to me as far as me being able to do it from a wanting to eat perspective, and that's where it landed. I mean, I've always been a frugal person anyway. I don't need much money, uh, but if it wasn't for her support, and you know what, I feel the need that to expand upon that even just a little bit further because I really want to emphasize how important her support is to me. I mentioned that I was the job in my career that I think everybody has like the worst job, so to speak. And when I was working for Metro, that was my worst job. It was very hard for me to go to work. I felt that it was not. I don't want to sound like I'm bashing, but it was. I felt soulless, I guess, and it was very upsetting. There were days I come home that I was very upset. I mean, I definitely drank too much at that point in time. Don't really consider myself an alcoholic, but I certainly leaned on it at the time. I don't drink anymore, but I did then. Smoked, and I was not that much of a smoker. I'd given it up, but I was now trying to. Well, in any case, she finally saw how much this was affecting me, and she said, "Greg, if you want, just quit. We'll be fine. Just quit."
Mm.
And it's amazing that level of support. In that one moment, I realized I can still go on with this. I can go on with this, look for the next position. And that's what I ended up doing because she was supporting me. So that strong
Mm.
support, when you go out on your own, I mean, it could be a wife, it could be family, it could be friends, it could be your community, it could be, you know, I know building community with the CvCISO. I mean, all of that can really really help, and lean on that because it can really really help.
Yeah, because there's definitely going to be. I mean, even if you have a very successful, business, and what makes a business successful is if you're the one, if this is your business, what makes a business successful is what you define as successful.
Hmm.
It's not what anybody else defines as successful. I love that one of the things I heard when from Michael Phelps, I think it was, he quoted it. He said, "Winners focus on winning, and losers focus on winners." Because I think we
Yeah.
do a lot of comparisons, right? So I've got this business, you've got that business. Oh, yours is only that. You know what I mean? It's like none of that crap matters. What matters is your focus, your vision, your mission.
Hmm.
And when you feel like you've attained your purpose, your why, well, then you're in your sweet spot. And over time, just like that's why I like the Bible so much too, is because there's so much wisdom in there. Because I've
Mm.
seen myself over the years in life and in work and in VC sewing where, and I love how you said stay focused, because it's very tempting to make a little compromise and then make
Hmm.
another little compromise because it's
Mm.
inconsequential, And there was one opportunity, I think, when we were back when I was losing the house. There was an opportunity for a big project. Somebody had heard my reputation or whatever and wanted to hire us to uh, help them with Anonymous. Anonymous was attacking them,
Oh
and
yes, yes, yes.
uh,
Yeah.
I was like, all right, And as we're talking, I'm like, man, this could save my house for sure. And well, I found out that it was an adult entertainment site. It was a porn site that
Hmm.
wanted to hire me,
Mm.
and I was like, okay, I got to think about this, because I do have my own. I mean, that's you create your own boundaries, your own vision, your own mission. Some people would have no issues taking that business. I did, and so I went to my pastor. I'm like, and his name was John. I'm like, John, what do you think, man? I mean, he goes, the fact that you're asking me the question shows that you already know the answer. And I was like,
Yep. Yeah.
son of a
Yeah.
bitch, I wanted this business so bad because it's going to solve all these problems, but I'm going to lose my integrity and it's not focused on the mission. But that one, I could have made that compromise. It would have seemed
Mhm.
inconsequential. And then, but I know enough in my own life and seen what I've done in the past that it's these little compromises that always come up to bite you in the end, because over a period of time, nothing seemed consequential, but then you're in a spot and you look back and you're like, how the hell did I get here? And you
Yeah.
replay it and you're like, well, it's because I made those compromises. So when you're, that's why, I think mission, purpose. Now, if you're in this business, if you want to be a VCSO and your biggest motivator is money, that's not necessarily wrong. And there's nothing wrong with having money. There's nothing wrong with having lots of money. It's how you obtained that money and how you use that money that's
Or the
important.
Right.
prioritization.
I will never
How
take a
much of a
dollar.
priority? Because you always say mission before money, but if money is the priority, then as you've told in class, that you might not hit the mission.
I've seen so many people over the years, and Greg, you probably have too, because we've been around long enough and we've seen enough people who have sold out
Yeah.
in this industry, who I think started here with the right purpose, with the right vision, and they were allies that they've completely sold out. It's all become money now. And you take like FR Secure, very successful business. I don't know how many they're killing it on vCISO work, and I've been asked, over the years, would you sell? And I said, no, I will never sell. And they're like, why? And I said, well, part of it's legacy and part of it's mission. I don't want the money, and there's no amount of money you could give me that would help me escape from this mindset that I sold out. Because even
It's
the mission bigger than that, the mission even bigger than fixing the broken industry, the mission ultimately is when I die, I just want to hear well done.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and on a much smaller scale, obviously. But I have walked that walk of the decision: do you want to sell? And I've had offers, and I ultimately came to the conclusion that no, that is not my path. My path is I'm taking vCISO services with me, and when I go, it's done. It is a very personal path for me. It started very personal, and if you stay focused on mission, you sometimes realize that your mission enhances as you go in ways that you didn't think about. And I'll give you three examples. Um, the first I've already talked about is the Virtual CISO Moment podcast. I have the ability, the blessing, to share other InfoSec pros stories, get their name out there, um, on a weekly basis, and all I do is sit back and ask questions and listen to their stories. And it's I
Mhm.
mean, how huge is that? I mean, I
I
don't
know.
get paid for it. I don't want to get paid for it. It takes time. I've become pretty efficient at it. I won't say good, but I've become efficient at it. And that just started as just a little minor marketing thing for for the for the business, and then that has also led to some other media work. I mean, I've done some radio and TV interviews. I'm a contributor. May have another project coming that I'm not at liberty to announce yet, but it's like, ooh, it could be really cool. So stay tuned.
I love it.
And then third is now I get a chance to plug
Your book,
information
yes.
security for small and mid-sized businesses, third edition, the red one,
Good segue,
and
man.
and you can see it in the background too. And how that started was as a lead magnet on the website. It's like it was a little ebook, and all it was is that you can appreciate as a virtual CISO, you have small and mid-sized businesses that are asking you the same question repeatedly. It sounds like that you
Mhm.
hear. It's like, okay, well, why don't I put this all down in a little guide? And then it's like, download this guide, give me your email address so I can bother you every month with crap. But
Right.
it gives you at least a little bit in plain English. This is what a SOC 2 is. This is why an audit's important. All that stuff. Well, the second edition, I decided to do a little bit more and made it a print edition. And I brought it to a couple of conferences, and um, I got feedback that this is great. In fact, in one conference, this was out in Houston 2 years ago. One of the keynote speakers actually held it up during the keynote. I didn't know this because I was manning the table, but he said, "This is probably one of the best books I've ever seen for small and mid-sized businesses. You got to stop by Greg's table and get it." And I started to have people stopping by.
Awesome.
I'm like, "Well, okay, this is great." So that prompted me to do the third edition, which is 50% more. Had some input, and finally actually started to treat this a little bit more serious. I had several folks in the industry do a beta read for it. And yeah, as you can see there, so far 17 ratings, 5-star right across the board. Very, very happy and pleased for that, but not for me, but because this is the more that can get out there, the more that maybe folks can get in folks' hands, people who really need to read that. Because again, now how does this all tie together to what I was talking about with purpose? God tapped me on the shoulder 7 years ago and said, "You can do better with your talents." I didn't necessarily know what he meant at that point in time, but this is a tangible example of what his plan for me was. by just saying, okay, I understand my purpose, and I'll say yes. Here we go.
Yeah, I love it. And so for people who are listening and not watching this episode, the title of the book is Information Security for Small and Mid-Sized Businesses. The author is ours truly, Greg Schaffer, Schaffer. The published date was June 27th. It is the third edition. If you're looking for the ISBN number, I got to find it somewhere, but follow along and we'll post it somewhere. It's a good
Yeah.
read. You did share it with me. I like the fact that it's very much, there's not a lot of fluff in it. It's like, it's very practical. It's very simple, easy to follow along. I think it's perfectly written for that audience. 156 pages long. I highly recommend anybody who's listening to go get a copy. Even if it's not who you're going to be serving, security is security. It's just the application that's different, right? So in a small to mid-sized business, those basics, principles, all those things apply. When you take it to a more complex organization, it's just more complex. There's just more of it. It's more complicated, what have you. So it's a great read, I think, for CISOs, vCISOs, small business leaders, all the above, man. It's really well written.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm actually starting to work on the fourth edition. I have gotten some good feedback. And one of the things I'm going to put in there is, and this is the first time, this is a premiere. So every year, I enjoy writing. And every year for vCISO services, I'll script a different scenario for business continuity tabletop exercises. 2018, I did the pandemic, and the reaction among clients was like, we're not going to have a pandemic. Why are we doing this? Well, hello, COVID. But I saved all those scenarios with questions and all that, and they're good scenarios, good feedback, and so that's going to be part of the next edition. It'll be a special addendum. It'll be like another, I don't know, 40 pages, something like that. Depends on how many more scenarios I write between now and when the fourth edition is ready. So,
Hey,
but thank you for sharing
if you
that.
like writing, because one of the things that's on my task list that I haven't gotten to, and I've started multiple times, is writing textbooks for the CvCISO program. So if you have
Ah,
any interest in helping, either co-writing it with me and Meg, or any involvement that you want to, that's not going to cause you unnecessary stress, you're invited to help me.
so yeah, and I know we're getting close to my hard stop, but I haven't. I need to emphasize a couple of things about the CvCISO program. I've already talked about. I was not too sure about it at first. Went through it. Absolutely love it. First of all, I highly, highly, highly endorse it.
Thank you.
And I want to be clear to everybody that I've always been transparent about it. That you all were kind enough to waive the tuition, but the tuition was not the big expense. I mean, that was a lot of time and a lot of effort. Just the classwork alone was 60 hours. And um, I, I will admit now that there was one or two times that when I was off camera that I kind of fell asleep.
Yep.
So I'm sorry about that.
Even when I
But
was
no,
on camera and I was still talking, I was actually sleeping.
Yeah.
but all this to say that I am such a supporter of it now. I believe that is the only thing that's solving the other part of the supply chain with regards to quality virtual CISOs. There's nothing else out there like it. I mean, yeah, a lot of it overlaps with like the CISSP program and this and that, but then again, there's that component of being a consultant, understanding small businesses and all that you cover so well. So all that to say, obviously, yes, I enthusiastically would love to help with that or anything else with regards to the program. I mean,
That
because
means
it's mission. So I'm there.
that
We're
means
all
the
in
world.
it together.
Well, that means the world to
Amen.
me. It really does, because you're there's so many qualities about you that are attractive to the mission, attractive to me, but also, I mean, when something, my dad always told me, consider the source.
Mm,
That's what he
yeah.
would always tell me, consider the source. So when people
Yeah.
say things, it's like, well, consider the source. Does it really matter? There's some things that, when I consider this source, it's like, this is a guy who I know is credible. I know he's a person of integrity. I know he's a mission driven. I mean, all those check boxes So, because you'd get, I mean, we all get compliments, a lot, and I don't. It's like, yeah, okay, whatever. But this one means a lot. It really does, because I think
Yeah.
together we can further the mission so much better than alone.
Well, and this comes down again to purpose. Again, I go back to what I just said. It's like I didn't know why God tapped me on the shoulder, but I think part of this purpose now is to help where I can. But with regards
Right.
to the program, and literally, thank God, Meg, that you reach out to me on the direct message on LinkedIn, and because I mean, you could have just let that go. It's like this old guy is ranting somewhere, and just let it go, and this and that.
Right.
But you had the tap to like reach
You
out
guys
as
are
well
frozen.
too, and I appreciate that. I mean, and that's why we're sitting here today. So
Yeah.
God weaves this really interesting story. He always does. It's like I never would have laid out these pieces and like predicted, okay, here we are.
Right.
And so I'm really excited to what is to come, because I know another thing from that God always blesses obedience. When I'm doing
yes,
what I'm,
Mhm.
and He knows me, obviously, and I'm always seeking. Sometimes I miss it for whatever reason, but I'm excited to see. And for me, I could give, I'm, the mission before money thing. It's I'm living it, right? Mission, 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 and money's not really an issue. I don't value money all that much. That's why I have people around me who do. But it's the same thing here, right? When you think about the potential of all the people that you can help, there's helping the vCISOs themselves. But what's even more important to me is helping the people that the vCISOs are helping.
mm-hmm.
And even beyond that, when you play out the whole supply chain here of people, it's us helping the vCISOs who are helping the small to mid-sized businesses who are helping their customers.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a whole, 4
Chain
levels
effect.
at least of helping when we get, when we get these things right. So
Yeah.
that's awesome,
Yeah.
man. We are coming up. I could talk to you probably all
I
day.
know.
We've got,
Yeah, and I hate the fact that I have a hard stop.
I get it.
I'll explain what that is off air at some point in
Yeah.
time. But
Well, it's such a
I
pleasure having you here, and I get a sense that we're going to have you back on a regular basis, because there's still so much more to unpack here. There's still so much more about
yeah,
you, the
Yeah.
way you apply things, the way what you learn. I'm on your website now. For people who want to go to Greg's website, it's vcisoservices.com. I also shared the vCISO Services YouTube channel. So,
mm-hmm.
go check that out. And then also his book, right? So I'm getting the sense from all this stuff that Greg probably has a little bit of ADHD too, because
I think I do. Yeah,
yeah.
And we'll put links in the show notes so that people can access them easily.
awesome. Appreciate that, and very much appreciate having the opportunity to be on here and talk about. Like I said, I agree with both of you. I could chat about this for extended period of time, but so yeah, I'd be happy to come back and chat some more.
Awesome. Have a great rest of the day and great weekend. We'll catch you next time, man.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Greg.